So far we've talked about the effect of mental models on sense making and mental models on perception. But mental models, by definition, if you remember, it's part of our learnings, our beliefs, our ideas, our hypotheses. It's something that's quite fluid and something that most of us accept as a construct that we hold in our minds. Let's go a little beyond and see if there are constructs and associations that we hold in our mind that are even more basic than mental models, which contribute to the formation and of these mental models themselves. So let's look at the basic associations. So when I ask people, what do you think is really basic and hardcore in your mind which you hold? Very often the answer comes up, memory. Yeah? What happened in the past? That is hard fact. We store it as hard fact and information in our minds. And that's only part of the story, really. So let's explore this notion of memory a little further. So I'm going to ask you very quickly to take a minute and ask yourself, how do you think the memory works? Just take a minute and ask yourself, how does the memory work? And I'm going to present an analogy to you and tell me if you think this is a good model of how the memory works. So if I were to tell you that memory is like a storage chest where we put things in, yeah, and they're there, yeah, and when I say I remember something, then I take things out of the storage chest. And occasionally I don't remember, or when I say I forget, it's just got lost, or I don't know where to look for it in the storage chest. Would you say this is a reasonable, accurate, or reasonable analogy of how the memory works? Well, most people tend to agree to this model of the way the memory works, with a few variations here and there. However, we know from science now that this is not how the memory works. This is how a computer's memory works. This is not how the human memory works. I'm going to get this. I think the best way to test this out is to just do a little experiment on ourselves. So I'm going to ask you to do a quick experiment on your own memory, because you have all the equipment there, because you have a memory inside your brain, right? So take a minute, close your eyes, and put your memory to test for a minute, yeah? So close your eyes right now. Good. Now I want you to recollect an incident from the last 5 years. If you can't do that, you can go further into your childhood. But recollect any incident that was pleasant, any memorable memory. Now I want you to put your memory to test and recollect this incident as vividly as you can. Recollect as many details, what happened, who all were there, everything. Recollect the incident in as much detail as you can with your eyes closed. Okay. Now open your eyes. Yeah? And think of the incident that you recollected and ask yourself, did you see yourself in the recollection of this incident? Now some of you may not have, but the large majority of people who do this exercise see themselves in the scene. Now how is this possible if memory is like a storage chest? Let me give you my own example. When I did this exercise for the first time, I recollected the final moments of a certain basketball match that I was playing, which was a very favorite match of mine, where we did some amazing strategic moves and we went on to win. But when I recollected the match, I saw it from a bird's eye view. I saw us playing. I saw myself if memory was like a storage chest, I wouldn't have seen myself in the scene. I would have seen the other players, I would have seen the ball, I would have seen it from my own eyes the way it happened. That is not how a lot of us have reconstructed. So what does this tell us about memory? That memory it's not as simple as storage and retrieval. It is a creative construction. If I may be more liberal with my language, I would say memory is also like storytelling. It is a narrative that we build. I know, so for those of us who like to put a lot of faith into our memory and say, I remember this, therefore it must be true. Let's take this a bit slowly, right? So let me first ask you, if the alternate idea that you had of memory being a storage chest, let me try and convince you why that doesn't make sense, okay? Let's look at a computer, because I told you that's how a computer's memory works. That's not how the human memory works. So in a computer, how do you save your files? When I work on a Word document, for example, I would do version 1, save, after some time version 2, save, version 2.5, yeah, at discrete intervals. Now there's Google Drive, it looks like it's saving it continuously, but you know that it's saving at small discrete intervals. What do you think happens in our mind, in memory? What is that discrete interval? We live in continuous time. So are we saving things at discrete points in time? How are we saving it? How are we saving something in continuous time? Because we exist in continuous time. So if it is in discrete time, what's the element of the discrete time? There is no answer, which is why we really have to jump that entire theory of memory being like a storage chest. If memory is not like a storage chest, now we need to look at a new model which can explain to us how the memory works. And that's the model that I'm presenting, which is that there are associations between elements and ideas in our mind. So we have associations here. I'm just going to call them basic associations, for lack of better words, that inform our mental models, that inform our sense-making process, and of course it is also possible that the basic associations can directly figure into our sense-making process. So we have these associations and then we construct narratives out of them to make sense. So the act of recollection is also an act of sense-making. Just like we make sense of data that comes in from outside, we also make sense of data that comes from inside. It's a sense-making process, but we just give the term recollection or remembering. But just like from outside, if we say we are seeing, it doesn't really mean that we are seeing everything. Just like that, when we say we are remembering, it doesn't mean we are recollecting things as they happen, because we have no access to that. We have no access to what happened. We only have access to certain associations, and we are picking out elements of those associations and building a narrative around that and saying, this is what I remember. Now this gets a little more interesting because it's not very clean. There are biases involved here. There's the egocentric biases. We construct these narratives in ways that we believe the context or situation demands. Let me give you an example. Let me tell you about an experiment, okay, that verifies this phenomenon, this fact that I just told you about. So in this experiment, there were two groups of students. Both of them were shown a videotape, right? And they were told that this is a memory test. So the experimental sample and the control sample were both shown a videotape of a car accident. Now this videotape was in black and white. It was about a car accident and the audio was dubbed, so there was no audio that was shown through the students. After that, the students were told that it's a memory test. Here's a series of questions. You need to answer these about the videotape to see as accurately as you can remember. All the questions that were asked were fairly similar, but somewhere towards the end of the questionnaire, there was one question that was worded differently for the two groups. For the first group, the experimental group, the question was asked, did you see any glass at the site of the crash? For the second group, the control group, the question was worded, did you see any glass at the site of the accident? That's all. That's the difference. And then the responses were collated and tabulated, and the mean responses were compared. Do you think there was any difference in the recollection between the two groups? Take a minute and think about it. Right? As some of you might have guessed, more people in the experimental group, in the experimental condition, actually reported seeing glass than the control group. Now, these students had no reason to lie. In fact, they had every reason to try and remember things as accurately as possible because it was memory test. They were getting marks for it, right? They were being evaluated. The incentive was to remember as accurately as possible. And yet these students, more of these students reported seeing glass than these students. Why do you think this was so? What was the cue? Just the word glass. Why? Because there's a basic association in many of our minds, right from childhood, of the word glass with the word crash. The word glass is associated with crash. Now go back to what I told you about how the memory functions. It is an act of narration, construction, sense making. The mind is trying to make sense of everything that it knows in the best way possible to meet the requirements of the context. In this case, the context told you to remember things as best as possible, as accurately as possible. There was some information, some association, some part of the association that had stuck about the images from the video that they saw, but during recollection, they were also included in that were all the other associations that they ever thought about the word glass, about the word crash, about accidents, about everything that was related to that. So since the mind associated the word glass with crash, the best fit guess in this case for many students was to actually give the answer that they recollected seeing glass, right? Okay, now this is scary enough, I know, but let's see something else about the memory, right? Which is, okay, let's look at these basic associations. So like I told you, things are not stored in real time, in discrete time, they're in real time, which means at any point in time, I have a given set of associations. At t equal to now, there's a certain set of associations in my mind. Glass and crashes is associated perhaps, perfumes and a certain perfume and beautiful women are associated, whatever it be. There are certain associations. A certain student and the word star are associated, right? So we have these associations at t equal to now. At t equal to now plus 5 minutes. Again, I have a certain set of associations in my mind. That's it. At t equal to now plus 10 minutes, I have a new set of associations in my mind. Where am I going with this? Where I'm going with this is that at t equal to now plus 5 minutes, I don't have access to what was the exact associations at t equal to now, because all we have hold our associations, which means, and this is really leads in psychology. This leads to a phenomenon that we call as hindsight bias. But I'll take you into the fundamentals behind this, which really means that the mind stores associations and information at a certain point in time, and then you add new information. That information gets merged with all the information that already existed, and now there's a new configuration of information and associations. After this has happened, we don't have access to what was the configuration, what was the state of associations and knowledge that was there in our mind before this happened, right? So I cannot ever with complete accuracy say that yesterday I didn't know this for sure, because once I've known it, it's fitted in. I'm just creating a best fit story about I would not have known this because of blah 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 blah, all the multiple things. So our mind is actually working very hard every time we try to recollect something as well. So there's a brilliant book that talks about this whole phenomenon in far more detail. It's called Mistakes Were Made But Not By Me by Carol Dewitt and her co-author. If you like this, you can explore more on that at your own time. But right now, let's bring this back to this idea of mental models and sense making and see why this is going to make this whole phenomenon of self-fulfilling prophecy and Pygmalion effect even more powerful than it was just when you were looking at the filters that filtered information coming from outside to inside, right? Because now we're seeing filters that filters that work here, that allow us to pick and choose between associations that exist in our mind, and we're also going to look at, how and these associations get formed. They get formed through the mental models, and this is all very fluid. This is the least fluid, more fluid, completely fluid.